Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Josie's Point of View, where we focus on human nature stories from the Carolinas and beyond. Today's Sunday, and it's May the 25th, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to my channel, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you find the information here to be informative. And if you're a return viewer, by all means, thank you for coming back. You know, I always say the tide changes so frequently here on these YouTube streets, so you always have to acknowledge where your support comes from. And I want you to know I sincerely thank you for your support. So feel free to like and to share this video, and don't forget to subscribe. And our story today comes from the Marine Corps base here at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Take a look at the headline. And it reads, North Carolina Marine sentenced to 8 years for killing a civilian on the base. I'll provide you with a summary here, and I'll identify some of my sources for you in the description box. So today's video summarizes the results of a recent military court-martial held at Camp Lejeune Marine Corps Base here in North Carolina earlier this month. It's the final chapter in a case from 2024 where a Marine Corps sergeant was arrested and charged with murder for shooting and killing a civilian on the base. Now, after listening to all of the evidence, there were many who believed the punishment the Marine received did not measure up to the crime that was committed. Many are left wondering whether justice was actually served in this case. So let's get right into it, and I'll share what I've been able to find out. Now, it was back in January of 2024 when we were first introduced to this case. The news headline from the Marine Corps Times read as follows: Marine arrested in shooting death of a civilian on North Carolina base. We learned at that time that a Marine sergeant had been detained in the shooting and killing of a civilian identified as a young female. And this shooting took place on the base on a Saturday morning in January. We also learned that a suspect again was in custody and that a weapon had been recovered from the scene of the crime. It was also mentioned that this was an isolated incident and they were not looking for any additional suspects. The Marine suspect was identified as 26-year-old Sergeant Dakota Honstein, assigned to the 2nd Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company, which is located on Camp Lejeune. Sergeant Honstein is originally from Cape Coral, Florida. He's been in the military since 2018. He was actually promoted to sergeant in 2022, and I did see a few pictures of him in media releases promoting the Marine Corps. In fact, I think I saw 3 or 4 pictures in which he was identified by name, but you really could not clearly see his face. But then again, we don't really need to see his face to tell our story. We soon learned that Sergeant Honstein would be facing charges for murder and involuntary manslaughter. Now, whenever possible, we try to focus on the victim, but the victim was never identified by name. She was identified simply by initial SS. Now, it was alleged that Honstein did murder the victim on January the 27th of last year by allegedly pulling the trigger of a loaded gun while he had it pointed at the victim. It was stated that the victim death was the result of culpable negligence. And in addition to the charges of murder and manslaughter, he would also be facing charges for violating a general order by wrongfully possessing a firearm while on the military base. Now, there were a few unanswered questions that I had. I wonder whether this was a weapon he used in the execution of his duties or whether it was a personal weapon that could not be determined from the information that was provided. I'm sure I would have found that clarification had I looked up the specifics of the case. But once my channel gets monetized, maybe I'll have a little bit more time to go into more detail. I'll take things to another level, more specifically in the cases I'm electing to discuss. But for right now, what we do know is that the victim was a woman, initial was SS, and she remained anonymous. And I think an appropriate question to ask is exactly what was the relationship between the suspect and the deceased victim? We don't know. It was never clarified. It was never explained, but I saw one report stating that the suspect and the deceased victim communicated electronically for several weeks after meeting online. So the nature of their relationship was not publicly known, and it was unclear whether they had met in person prior to the actual date of the shooting. And so Sergeant Dakota Hunstein was charged with murder and involuntary manslaughter and was scheduled to face a military court martial, which began on April the 21st and ran through May the 6th, 2025. Now, there are so many specifics about this case that was never made public. And when speaking of a general court martial, the service member has the option of having his case heard by a lone judge or by a panel of 8 military personnel. Now, these are options afforded any service member, and we are unsure of the method he selected, but we do know that he entered a plea of not guilty to all of the charges. And at the conclusion of that court martial, Sergeant Heinstein was not found guilty of murder. However, the court martial did determine that he was guilty of a lesser charge of manslaughter and guilty of violating a lawful general order by possessing a firearm on the base, which caused the death of the victim on January the 27th, 2024. And that military court sentenced him as follows: 8 years of confinement. That includes 7 years for the manslaughter charge and 1 year on the weapons charge, a dishonorable discharge, total forfeiture of all pay, and reduction in rank to private. There was no mention of credit for time already served, but if that was granted, it's possible that his sentence could be reduced by an additional 15 months. And there are many in the community who are wondering whether the sentence was fair, whether the sentence was just, and whether it takes into consideration the pain and the suffering of the victim's family. 7 years for manslaughter seems like it's just a slap on the wrist. Many are wondering how in the world this is possible. To many, the sentence of 7 years seems like another insult to the victim's family, who I'm sure are still struggling to come to terms with the death of a loved one. See, might as well have given him probation. It's true that no sentence can ever bring the victim back, but there's always hope that a sentence that is firm and just and sends a strong message to others would give the family a feeling of fulfillment and possible peace of mind. This does not appear to be the case in this instance, and the fact that the victim remains anonymous, it's really difficult to truly understand what they're going through because individuals in the community are unable to reach out to them. But we probably have not heard the last of this case because most likely there will be lawsuits filed by the victim's family against the military for the manner in which her life ended. But then again, because the military often makes these decisions under a cloud of secrecy, we probably won't hear about it. But I'll try to stay on top of this case and I'll bring you updates whenever they become available. And that's all I have for you right now. Feel free to leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about this video. And by all means, feel free to like it and to share it. And if you haven't done so already, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel by clicking on that red subscribe button. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on the bell that looks just like this one, that's the notification bell. If you click on that notification bell, you'll be the first to know whenever a new video is uploaded. I thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.